Coming up in our newscast tonight. The nation's top economic policymakers are putting their heads together to come up with measures that can tackle growing unemployment rate and income distribution issues. Low birth rate coupled with a rapidly aging population continues to be an alarming issue for Korea. One-person households became the main family type last year, and now the number of those between ages 15 and 64 dipped for the first time ever. South Korean athletes add more gold to its medal tally at the Asian Games in Indonesia. Expectations are high now that the remaining events will also conclude with members of Team Korea standing on the winner's podium. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. Unemployment, sluggish job growth, and a widening wealth gap. Problems Korea has been facing for some time now, which is why Korea's top economic policymakers met to work on turning things around with renewed determination. Go Ryuni starts us out with the highlights from that session.
South Korea's finance chief says the government will do its utmost to resolve high unemployment and uneven income distribution in the country. At an economic-related ministers' meeting on Monday, Kim Dong-yeon said job data and unequal income distribution have worsened, and he vowed to swiftly implement policy announced in July and August to support the self-employed and those in the lower income classes. The policymakers also discussed measures to create jobs for people in their 50s and 60s. The Ministry of Employment and Labor said it will make more people in that age group eligible for the government's employment subsidies. The subsidies took effect this January, providing around $350 a month to medium-sized companies and $720 to small firms when they hire a person in their 50s or 60s. And they get the benefit for up to a year. The ministry said it will raise the number of people on the program within this year from the current 2,000 to 3,000 and by next year to 5,000. The subsidy will also cover 29 additional types of work compared to when it started. The plan is to spend in total around $24.6 million next year. The chiefs of economy-related ministries also vowed to increase investment in social overhead capital related to people's everyday lives. This means building more cultural, sports, and welfare facilities for job creation and expanding the number of urban regeneration projects in parts of the country that are more run down. The government believes this will not only stimulate regional economies, but also improve people's quality of life. For those projects, next year's budget will include around $7.81 billion, which is a 50% increase from this year. Go Ryuni, Arirang News.
Staying with a gathering of economic policymakers to discuss measures to push the Moon administration's initiative at the 6th Innovative Growth Strategy Review meeting, the first Vice Minister of Economy and Finance emphasized that all ministries need to work together to create more jobs and devise detailed plans in areas like big data and AI before the year is up. To spur private investment, Ko Young-won pointed out the government must try harder to pass laws on deregulation in various industries. Low birth rates and rapidly aging population are clearly impacting the number of economically active population as well as the composition of households here in the nation. Reaching record levels and hitting historic firsts, the latest data paints a gloomy picture for Korea. Kim Ji-yeon provides a closer look into these chronic issues.
For the first time in Korean history, the country's economically active population of those aged between 15 and 64 contracted last year. Data released by Statistics Korea on Monday shows the demographic group dropped by 0.3% from the previous year to around 36.2 million in 2017. It cites low birth rates and a rapidly aging population as the main reasons for the decline, adding that the number of those aged 65 years or older has climbed by more than 14% from a year earlier to more than 7.1 million last year. Meanwhile, those aged 14 or younger increased by around 13% on year to just over 6.6 million. In terms of households, the total number surpassed the 20 million mark for the first time, mainly due to the growing trend towards smaller households. Although the proportion of one- or two-person households comprised a combined 50%, one-member households were the main family type in 2017, accounting for nearly 29%. Those aged 70 or older constituted a staggering 18% of single-member households in 2017, followed by those in their 30s at around 17%. The general population of those living in Korea increased by 0.3% from the previous year to record over 51.4 million people as of November 2017. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Regarding the government's proposal to reform the national pension system, President Moon Jae-in pointed out reaching a social consensus to change the program is indispensable.
국민연금의 주인은 국민이므로 국민연금 제도 개혁에 있어서 가장 중요한 것은 사회적 합의입니다.
The remark was made during a weekly meeting with top aides amid rising speculation among the public. The funds could be depleted by 2057, a claim made by an advisory panel of the public pension a couple of weeks ago. While raising premiums is inevitable, the South Korean leader called for efforts to ease public anxiety. Stressing the system is managed by the country itself, he provided reassurance that as long as a nation exists, there can never be a case where one cannot collect his or her payments after paying the insurance premiums. Moon also highlighted one of the most important objectives of revising the system is to strengthen the income of senior citizens, especially those above the age of 65. In the first half of the year, the nation saw the highest trading volume in both import and exports. The trend is driven mainly by a bullish trend in the global petroleum market. Yoon Jung-min helped us look beyond the numbers.
South Korea saw the highest trading volume of petroleum products this year it's ever recorded for the January to June period, adding momentum to the local economy. According to the Trade Ministry on Monday, Korea brought in some 560 million barrels of crude oil in the first half, up 2.7% from the same time last year, hitting a record high. Imports from the U.S. through June soared near 360% to 14.1 million barrels. Korea bought more U.S. shale oil while reducing volumes from the traditional oil producers in the Middle East. As for exports, sales of petroleum goods went up 4.2% on year to 260 million barrels. Total revenue amounted to some $22 billion due mainly to an increase in global oil prices on rising demand for gasoline and diesel. Prices for both inched up 0.5% and 1.1% respectively. The bullish demand for Korea's oil goods is a positive sign for the local economy. Exports of gasoline to Indonesia, in particular, jumped more than 2,000%. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
It was over as soon as it began. That's how it felt for the participants of the long overdue reunion event for families torn apart by a war that divided a nation in two. What made it even harder for those of us watching the touching meetings is how we could sense the graying Koreans hoping to make each second count and last. To get a better understanding of how the long overdue event went firsthand, let's turn to our Unification Ministry correspondent who has been bringing us all the moments as they happened. Oh Jung-hee joins us in the studio. Jung-hee, welcome.
Great to be here.
Now, we have an idea of what the atmosphere was like. We've seen, of course, constant updates, but we cannot fathom how difficult it must have been for you covering the story constantly and holding back the tears while it happened.
That's right. I mean, the reunions were very much tearful and very much sad because I could see that the family members just teared up right after they saw their North Korean relatives appear, mostly because they see their, like mothers or fathers who've already passed away. Like they teared up mostly because the North Korean relatives resemble their South Korean family members who've already passed away. For example, nieces meeting their aunts would cry out that their North Korean aunt looks so much like their mom, and there was a really sad case of a 60 67-year-old South Korean man who met his 88-year-old North Korean dad for the first time in his life because they've been separated when the man's mother was pregnant. A 92-year-old woman met her son for the first time in 70 years. The last time they were together, the man was only 4. There were a lot of heartbreaking stories and therefore a lot of tears and regret at the reunions. But before I go deeper, let's take a look at some actual footage of these scenes.
엄마도 더 밉거든? 근데 너무 똑같대. 쌍둥이 같다. 저기서 들어오는데 우리 엄마가 살아 돌아오시는 줄 알았어.
Right, and understand they were given more.
18년을 기다렸잖아요. 건강하셔서 괜찮아서 나는 꿈에도 생각 못했어요. 살아 계시는 거는 꿈에도 못했어요.
And I understand they were given a more private setting this time, different from the past, and gift exchanges were the norm. Any of them stood out? I'm sure every one of them had significant meanings, though.
Well, I could see that most families brought pictures of the past, like pictures in frames, which they would look at together and talk about the years gone by. They'd also take Polaroid pictures together so they could exchange them right on the spot. A lot of them also exchanged their phone numbers and home addresses so they'll be ready to write to each other in the future if that ever becomes possible. The South Korean families mostly brought daily necessities, clothing, and food like ramyeon, but aside from these presents, it's really the letters and photos these people find meaningful. We could also see quite a number of North Korean participants tear up after reading letters from their grandsons or daughters from the other side of the border that they've never met in their lives.
Now, this was the 21st reunion of war-torn families, but not nearly enough, never, and too many years wasted without holding the actual event. First in almost 3 years. Were there any clear, visible efforts by organizers on both sides to make sure they make up for lost time?
Well, in general, I could sense that the authorities of Seoul and Pyongyang worked very hard to provide the best conditions for these elderly participants this time, as much as this is the first reunion in 3 years. So South and North Korean authorities made it so that these elderly participants had to move around as little as possible, and they increased the number of hours they got to spend with their relatives in their private rooms from 2 hours to 3 hours as well. Though that might seem like a minor change, we heard from the families that their individual get-togethers were much better than the public reunions because they could speak more candidly with each other away from the eyes of South and North Korean officials. The authorities of South and North Korea also decided to give them more time to spend with each other than initially planned. As the reunions were going on, the South Korean authorities suggested to North Korea that the last session on the final day be extended from 2 hours to 3, and the North agreed, so the families got to spend 12 hours in total rather than 11.
3 days on paper, but in actuality only half a day together altogether. Nowhere near enough to make up for 7 decades apart. The need to hold many more as soon as possible is very important, but it's a race against time, and many of them are up there in ages with dismal chances of making the cut.
That's right. I actually had a chance to speak with South Korean participants, and a lot of them told me that, getting a chance to participate at these family reunions is actually like winning a lottery. Still, there are 50,000 South Koreans on the list wishing to meet their loved ones in the North, but that's already a number down by tens of thousands as separated family members keep passing away, as already 70 years have passed since the Korean War. And though I say there are 50,000 people on the waiting list, there could be a lot more, because some South Koreans actually choose not to apply for the reunions in the first place because they just know that there's a very low chance for them to actually get the opportunity. 3,000 to 4,000 separated family members die every year, and time is indeed running out for those still alive to reunite with their families in the North.
We do find solace in the fact that inter-Korean relations has been improving quite a lot recently, and the rapid thaw might help ensure the reunions take place more often, perhaps?
Well, you're right. I mean, South Korean authorities are definitely very much eager to make that happen. And throughout last week's reunions, the head of South Korea's Red Cross, Park Kyung-seo, was at Mount Kumgang with the families, and he met with his North Korean counterpart, Park Yong-il, the head of North Korea's Red Cross. They agreed to work to hold one more reunion within this year, possibly at the end of October before it gets too cold. The specifics would have to be ironed out through working-level talks, but at least we know that South and North Korea now see eye to eye on the need for these family reunions and their importance as a humanitarian issue.
Now, Chung-hee, it's a difficult situation even if we are allowed to push together the two Koreas to make more reunions a reality. Only about 100 participants get to take part in each session.
You're right. I mean, one option would be to hold these family reunions regularly. So agreeing from the first place that they would be held like once in 3 months or so. And some other ways to fundamentally help these families would be, for example, to let them write to each other or visit their hometowns in the other side of the border. The authorities could also select a few places to serve as meeting spots for them so that they could freely set a time and see each other. But these proposals are maybe too idealistic for now. So the Red Cross says it will continue the discussions with the North, and we will have to see how that goes throughout the rest of the year.
Well, something is definitely better than nothing, and we are working to ensure progress is made instead of just sitting around and hoping for changes to come out of nowhere. Thank you so much for coming in today, Chung-hee.
My pleasure.
Officials from Seoul and Washington met last week to continue discussions on splitting defense bills, but after 2 days of talks, the 6th round of their kind, it's clear they're not able to meet halfway yet. For details, let's turn to our Kan Young-woo.
South Korea and the United States continued their talks late last week in Seoul on sharing defense costs. It seems they're still trying to narrow down their differences, but at the same time, they see eye to eye on the need to further improve their communication. An official at South Korea's foreign ministry said Monday that the allies were unable to reach an agreement on the key points, including how much South Korea should pay in total and Washington's demand that Seoul pay for a new category of expenses called operational support, which is for American troops outside the peninsula. This operational support includes the deployment of aircraft carriers, long-range bombers, and nuclear submarines. Under the latest 5-year deal, as of 2018, South Korea pays around $856 million to have U.S. troops on its soil, which experts say is around 40 to 50% of the total bill. But Seoul is standing firm that it can spend money in 3 areas, which are payroll, construction, and logistics, as it has in the past. The 2014 agreement on sharing the costs of America's defense of its ally will expire by the end of this year. So South Korea aims to conclude the talks with the U.S. before November, as it is expected to take at least 2 or 3 months to get the National Assembly's approval. But the foreign ministry official noted that the agreement terms are more important than simply meeting the deadline. Seoul and Washington plan to hold another round of talks in the U.S. next month. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
For 2 months, special prosecutors probed the sitting governor of Gyeongsang-namdo province who allegedly colluded with a power blogger who orchestrated online opinion rigging operations in favor of the now ruling Democratic Party. The team announced there's evidence showing Kim Kyung-soo was indeed involved in the political maneuvering scandal. Oh Soo-young updates us on the investigations.
Gyeongsang-namdo Governor Kim Kyung-soo was found to have colluded with an influential blogger nicknamed Ju King to sway political sentiment in the lead-up to the 2017 presidential election. That's according to Special Counsel Ho Ik-bom, who shared the results of a 60-day independent probe on the case.
1.4 million comments on some 81,000 news articles were rigged with like and unlike clicks 99 million times systematically through a macro program.
Ho said the team procured records and testimonies confirming suspicions that Kim had attended the blogger's demonstration of a comment-rigging program called King Crab in November 2016, before giving the green light to further develop and use the software. According to Ho's probe team, the rigging activities began the following month and surged amid the political turmoil surrounding ex-President Park Geun-hye in early 2017, hitting more than 7 million counts in the months after her impeachment. That's believed to have influenced the presidential election won by incumbent Liberal leader Moon Jae-in. Investigators also found that Kim had offered a diplomatic position for one of Drew King's associates ahead of this year's local elections after continuous requests from the blogger. While Kim has vehemently denied these allegations, the pro team decided to indict the former politician without detention last week, accusing him of conspiring with Drew King and violating the national election law. But on allegations that Kim received illegal political funds and also handed a certain amount of money to Drew King at the king crab demonstration, the special counsel said there was no evidence of such irregularities. There was, however, evidence against incumbent presidential secretaries Song In-bae and Baek Won-woo over their alleged alliances with Drew King. Ho said his team will continue to work to substantiate their case against Kim, the blogger, and others implicated in the scandal during their trial procedures. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Top military figures in Myanmar should be tried in international court. That's according to a UN report that found senior officials responsible for mass genocide and sex crimes against the Rohingya carried out by troops under their command. Last year, Myanmar's military launched a crackdown on the ethnic minority after militants known as the Arirang Rohingya Salvation Army attacked police posts. The government claims the operations targeted militant threats, but the fact-finding report lists the military's tactics as grossly disproportionate. The UN noted the country's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi failed to intervene to stop the violence. It's been another golden weekend for Team South Korea. The national team athletes are looked to keep the streak going today as well. Sabobin brings us the highlights and outlines what events to watch out for.
The first medal news comes from the two Korea's unified canoeing team. In the men's 1,000-meter dragon boat race, the Koreans won a bronze medal in the final event on Monday. The 16-member dragon boat team finished in a time of 4 minutes 36.459 seconds. This is the third time the unified Korean team has won a medal at an international sporting event. The first two medals also came from this year's Asian Games, both from the unified women's dragon boat race. With this, the schedule for the unified Korean team is all done for this year's Asian Games. South Korea's women archers beat Chinese Taipei 5-3 in the recurve archery event. The South Korean women have been number one for 6 straight Asian Games going back to Bangkok in 1998. In the compound mixed team event, South Korea had to settle for silver, losing to Chinese Taipei by 1 point. South Korea will compete in the men's and women's team compound finals on Tuesday. In other sports, the South Korean women's handball team is going to the finals after defeating Thailand 40-13 in the semifinals on Monday. South Korea will face the winner of the other semifinal between China and Japan on Thursday, and if they win, it'll be their second win at the Asian Games in a row. More sporting events are coming up later in the day, with the men's baseball team preliminary match at 8:30 p.m. Korea time and the women's long jump finals at 8:40 p.m. 서보빈, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Buck at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the rain stopped in Seoul, but I hear it's still pouring in some other regions.
That's right, Daniel. Heavy rain alerts have been lifted in the central region, but rain clouds are still concentrating over in the southern provinces, including Chungcheongdo province, and precipitation is forecast to continue until tomorrow morning. However, the central region will be under rainy conditions again tomorrow. Meanwhile, Beijing will be dry and partly sunny. Tokyo, however, has thunder and lightning, and rain is in the forecast as well. Now back to the Korean Peninsula. Until tomorrow, the southern regions will receive up to 80 millimeters of precipitation, while Jirishan Mountains should expect up to 120 millimeters. The central region, including Seoul, will receive between 20 to 60 millimeters of more rain. Now, Seoul will begin the morning at 23 degrees Celsius tomorrow, and Busan starts at 25 and Jeju at 26 degrees. The nation's daytime highs will stand between 26 and 32 degrees, and it looks like it's going to be hotter for the south. And it seems like this is going to be a rainy week, especially for the central region, at least until Thursday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
These are the stories we could squeeze into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.